In this recording, I'm going to talk about the structure of the cell membrane and the mechanisms of molecules transport across the cell membrane. Let's look at some opening questions before we start this section. What are the boundaries of a cell? What is the composition of the boundary? Does a boundary isolate the cell from the environment? The boundary of the cell is called the plasma membrane. Plasma membrane has the following functions. It will separate the cytoplasma content from the environment. It will allow substance to go in and out of the cell with selectivity. The plasma membrane will also receive the stimuli from the environment and respond to it. The plasma membrane has four major components: phospholipids, proteins, carbohydrates, and cholesterol. The phospholipid is the major component of the plasma membrane. It will form of two layers of this phospholipid molecule shown in this slide. The phospholipid has the phosphate head. This head is hydrophilic, which means the head is water dissolvable. The phosphate head linked with two fatty acid tails. These tails are hydrophobic. Hydrophobic means they are not going to be dissolved in the water. The cell membrane is made by two layers of phospholipid molecules. The phosphate head will face the exterior environment, which is the water-based environment, and the tails are packed inside of those layers to avoid the contact with water. Here's a picture to show the phospholipid bilayer of the cell membrane. This is the phosphate head. These are the fatty acid tail. So the two layers are opposite direction to each other to form this plasma membrane structure. On each side of the phosphate head, it's a water-based environment. Outside of cell is the extracellular environment. Inside of cell is the cytoplasma environment. Within the phospholipid bilayers, they are embedded with proteins. So there are two types of proteins. One type is the surface protein. The other one is the channel protein. The channel protein will pass through the phospholipid bilayer. Those proteins mainly function as molecules for transport or recognition of the foreign materials. Some proteins are attached to molecules of carbohydrate. So those carbohydrates function as a recognition site. The proteins located in the plasma membrane has the following functions. First, it can function as a transport protein to help molecules pass in and out of the membrane. Second, it can function as receptors. They can receive the external stimuli and pass the signal into the cytoplasma content of the cell. Thirdly, the membrane protein can form as adhesion. The cell can stick to other cells. The membrane protein can also function as enzymes to speed up some chemical reaction. The cell is surrounded by the plasma membrane, and organelles within the cells are also wrapped around by the cell membrane. So those cell membranes all have a common function to regulate the flow of materials in and outside the cell or in and outside of those organelles. When membrane transport molecules, it will selectively allow the materials to be in and out. So the membrane has a characteristic of selective permeability. So it will allow certain material to go free and certain material to pass under certain conditions, or some molecules cannot pass at all. There are two types of transport mechanisms: passive versus active transport. Passive transport requires no energy molecule. The substance will move along a concentration gradient from high concentration area to low concentration area. The active transport requires energy. The substances will move against the concentration gradient from low concentration area to high concentration area. Those are the two types of transport mechanisms membranes use. What is the concentration gradient? Concentration gradient is the concentration of substance. When they are uneven, it will form a gradient. For example, You have a lot of these red molecules, but inside the cell, you only have a few. The difference between the concentrations of this molecule outside the cell in comparison to inside the cell is called the concentration gradient. The passive transport will diffuse this molecule from outside the cell, which has a high concentration area, to inside of the cell, which is the low concentration area. This movement of molecules from high concentration area to low concentration area is called diffusion. The diffusion of water molecule is called osmosis. Water will always flow from high concentration area to low concentration area. Some passive transport will need help of protein due to the size of the molecules. This is called facilitated diffusion. So facilitated diffusion, the molecules will still move from a high concentration area to low concentration area, follow the concentration gradient. It does not require any energy molecules to help for this transport to occur. However, it will require a protein molecule to help for this passive transport process. This is called facilitated diffusion. Active transport requires energy molecule to help the molecule across the membrane. The reason is because molecules will move against the concentration gradient. The molecules will move from low concentration area to high concentration area. Examples are potassium pumps located across our cell membrane. Potassium are high concentration inside the cell, but low in the extracellular environment. When you want to move the potassium from outside the cell, where is the low concentration area, to inside the cell, which is a high concentration area, it will require the help of energy molecules to open the protein channels. This is called active transport. Endocytosis and exocytosis belong to the active transport. All these processes is to move the molecules against the concentration gradients and also require the energy molecules to help. Endocytosis is to bring the molecule to the inside of the cell. For example, you want to bring food molecule into the cell. That will be called phagocytosis. You want to bring little water droplet into the cell. That is called pinocytosis. All those processes belong to the endocytosis, which are active transport. Exocytosis is to dump the useless materials to the outside of the cell. So this process is also against the concentration gradients. For example, the tears. This is a summarized table to help you study the differences between active and passive transport. We have different types of passive transport: diffusion, osmosis, facilitated transport. We have active transport, endocytosis, which include phagocytosis, pinocytosis. Exocytosis is another type of active transport. Passive transport does not require energy molecule, but active transport does. Passive transport will move the molecule from high to low concentration area down the concentration gradient, but active transport is the opposite direction. Hopefully, this short video will help you understand the structure of the cell membrane and the mechanisms of membrane transport.